Today we're talking all about Ludovico Einaudi's wonderful new solo piano piece, Wind Song. Maybe you're already learning this piece after getting the music on Musicnotes.com. Maybe you're just a fan of Einaudi's music. I'm a big fan of his music. Maybe you're thinking about learning this piece in the future. In all of those cases, today's video is for you. This is going to be a fairly long lesson, and we're going to talk about a ton of stuff. So to make it a little easier to digest, I've divided this video up into 3 parts: technique, form, and musicality. Now, there's going to be a lot covered within each one of these topics, but if you'd like to skip to one, or if you're coming back to this lesson after viewing parts of it but not all of it, just skip to the times on screen for the beginning of each of those sections. I'm Charles Szczepanek, a signature artist here at Musicnotes.com. You can also find me at my personal YouTube channel where I perform, Charles Szczepanek, at Pianist Academy on YouTube where I teach, and at charlesstepanek.com on the web. Okay, diving in. Today's lesson is going to be great for intermediate and early advanced pianists. And there is one bit of technique that I'd like to draw particular attention to. It has to do with our left hand. Wind Song has a particular pattern in the left hand that repeats nearly exactly for every bar of the piece. Now that pattern is the root of the chord on the bottom on beat 1, followed by an interval of a 6th or a 5th up higher on beat 2, followed by no more new notes on beat 3. Almost every bar of the piece follows this pattern. Root on beat 1, 5th or 6th up higher on beat 2, nothing on beat 3. Now, there are 2 ways to approach playing measures like this, and the one that you choose is going to depend on how large your particular hand is and what your maximum stretch is. This sometimes can be divided by age because typically younger pianists are going to have smaller hands than adults, but this isn't true 100% of the time. So if your hand has a maximum reach of, say, around an octave or less, we need to take particular care in making sure that we aren't extending our hands and our fingers as far as they could stretch as we play this. Okay? Sometimes it can be tempting. We see these notes, single notes, and then something else that's further away, and we feel like we want to try to stretch there as much as possible because it's going to make our job easier. Well, it's not. Stretching like this over a long period can actually, it's not only uncomfortable and not only can prevent us from playing musically, it can also tire us out because stretching the hand out like this uses a lot of muscles, and we're not giving them any time to relax. And more importantly, it has the potential to cause some really serious injury in the hands and the wrists if you continue to practice stretched out for long periods of time. So instead, we need to embrace the fact that every transition from beat 1 to beat 2 is going to be a skip or a jump in the left hand of this piece. So we're going to do our best to keep our hand and fingers as relaxed as possible while we play this piece. Now, because we found out we're going to have to make this a skip every bar, we open up 3 possibilities of fingerings to use when we play measures like this one in B minor. This is the measure that begins the piece, and it is heard maybe 50% of the bars in the piece. I haven't counted exactly, but it's all over the music, okay? So our 3 choices of fingerings are starting with 5 on the root to 5-1 on the top, 5 to 4-1 on the top, and 5 to 3-1 on the top. Now, why do all of them start with 5? I try to stay away from using any finger except for 5 on the bottom because we want our hand to be as close to the next notes we need to play as possible. So keeping it on 5, keeping the 5th finger playing this downbeat, the root of the chord, lets our hand be very close to where it needs to be next. Let's say we get tempted to use a stronger finger, like our second finger. Our second finger is very strong. We like to use it a lot, right? Let's say we want to play this bar with the second finger and then play the leap or the skip. Now just watch, how far does the hand have to travel to play this skip? It's a long way, okay? If we stick with 5, much shorter distance, right? The shorter the distance we have to travel, the more notes we're going to play right, the more accurate we're going to be, the more musical we're going to be able to play. So that's always our goal. Keep the hand traveling as short of a distance as possible. Okay, so now which fingering of these choices is right for you? Now, don't hate me for saying this, but that is actually something that only you can decide. I'm going to talk you through all the options, the pros and cons, but this is going to be up to you to decide what's most comfortable in your own hand, okay? Playing 5-1 on the top keeps our hand as relaxed and unstretched as possible. This might be really comfortable for you. Now, I find that playing 5 on top and skipping from 5th finger to 5th finger, it's a bit of a risk. It's kind of a minefield. I don't always know if I'm going to play the right note on the next note. So it can be difficult to stay accurate, right? Accurate when we use the same finger twice in a row. Also, the 5th finger is it's a short finger. It's second only to the thumb, right? And when we need to put the 5th finger on a black key, our entire hand, wrist, arm has to turn and be at quite an angle. If neutral position is about 90 degrees to the keyboard, look at how far we have to move, right? That's a big angle to play at. Now, if we don't make that angle and we try to play at 90 degrees, first of all, my elbow is going to run into my body, so I can't do that. My thumb then has to go way up into the key. I still make this really weird and awkward position with my hand, and I have to even lean back to do it because my arm is crossing over. This isn't a hard enough piece of music where we have to make a choice like this, right? We also, to highlight one other problem, we never want to put fingers between black keys if we can avoid it. That's a whole nother problem, okay? Unless you absolutely have to, don't put your fingers between the black keys. There are plenty of times when you already have to go through that. Don't make it harder on yourself, okay? So playing with 5-1, the biggest pro is that it's very, very relaxed. The cons, playing 5 in a row twice might not be the most accurate. It's a little risky. And also our change in arm angle, wrist angle might be new or uncomfortable for you. Okay, what about using 4-1 on the top? In this case, it's nearly as relaxed as 5-1 is, and we get the bonus of not needing to use 5 twice in a row, right? So we get a little more accuracy. And since the finger is longer, the 4th finger is longer, our arm and our wrist don't need to be turned or angled nearly as much. So if this is 4-1 and this is 5-1, just look at the difference in angle between 4-1, 5-1, right? That's much less angle, okay? Now the downside of this is that the 4th finger is a weak finger and it can sometimes be difficult to control. It can be inaccurate at times. And this is a very quiet piece of music. All of these bars of repeated notes, they need to be played delicately, very quietly. 4 is going to make that a little bit difficult because it's just not our strongest of fingers. Okay, what about using 3-1 on the top? In this case, there's a bit more of a stretch on the right side of the hand, so it's not quite as relaxed as the other two options. But our 3rd finger is our longest finger, and it's also a strong finger, so we have lots of control using this option. We can really feel confident playing softly. All right, so we just explored 3 different options. 5-1, the pro was super relaxed, super comfortable. Cons were a little bit risky to use 5 twice in a row, and the angle of our hand may not be ideal, right? 4-1. 4-1 is great because now we have a longer finger on the black key, so we have less of an arm and a wrist angle. But 4 is a little weak. It can be difficult to control. This is a quiet piece of music. It needs lots of control. 3 is the most stretched of all of them, so it may be the least comfortable for you. But the pros of using 3 are that we have a lot of control. The 3rd finger is a strong finger. We get about as much control as possible playing this softly with just the articulation and the quality of sound that we want. Now, the most comfortable option is based completely on your own particular hand and how it's structured. All 3 of these options are viable. Now, they all just have certain pitfalls to watch out for in practice, things to be careful that we don't fall into in practice, and they also have certain benefits that are going to make them easier during your practice time. There isn't one that's better than another, except the one that works best for you in particular, the one that's most comfortable for you, the one that fits your technique the best. Now, there are a few other patterns throughout this piece where we don't necessarily use the same fingering in the left hand. So let's go through a couple of those really quickly. We played this one in B minor. That is a majority of what the left hand does throughout the piece, but there's also, for example, G major, and there's E minor, and there's a D major. Okay, now each of these has a slightly different shape on the keyboard. If we go back to B minor, we had a white key as the root, a black key in the middle, and a white key on top. We paid particular attention to the black key in the middle because we needed to use one of our longer fingers, probably, to play it. right? But let's say we go to the next chord, G major. Now there are no black keys. Now our choices are dramatically different, okay? I find it very comfortable to use 5 twice in a row here. And because of how uncomfortable 4 and especially 3 is when you play 2 white keys in a row, those are very uncomfortable. I would much rather take the risk of playing 5 twice in a row and the possible inaccuracy than the weirdness and the awkwardness of playing 4 or 3 on the bottom when we have all white keys. We can take this further. How about the one that's in D major? This is another totally different shape, right? We have white key on the bottom, white key in the middle, and black key on the top. Now that makes a difference in the fingering choices that we have. Okay, we're still gonna play 5 on the bottom, but now maybe we play 5-1 on the top, or maybe we play 5-2 on the top. 2 is starting to become a little bit of a stretch, and if you can't reach an octave, this is probably not gonna work for you. You're gonna be stuck with having to play it 5-1 no matter what. But that's not a problem. That's great. It's actually quite easy that way. If you can play 5-2, it's just another choice in your bag of tricks, okay? This is another one where we're definitely not going to want to play 4. Look at where the 4th finger has to be, right in the middle of those black keys. That's incredibly hard to play that. 3 is the same problem. It's right in the middle of the black keys. We don't want to have to do that. This brings me to my first point about piano music in general. I actually prefer music that doesn't have fingerings written in it for precisely the reasons that we just talked about. In a lot of cases, there are many ways of getting from point A to point B with fingering choices. And the way that one editor might suggest fingering could be great for their hand, and it could be great for some people out there, but not good and maybe even bad for other people out there. Now, once fingering is written down on the page, or if it's printed on what the score that we buy, it can be really mentally difficult to change it. We have a lot of respect for the score, the printed score, for what's on the page. We should have a lot of respect for what the composer put down, and that's great. But we need to remember that composers probably didn't write down the fingerings, and if the composers are really good pianists and good teachers, they're going to understand that the way every person approaches a piece of music is going to be different because it's completely based on your hand, the way it's built, the length of your fingers, where you are in your own pianistic development. So the best choice is always the one that is most comfortable for you in particular. It doesn't matter what's on the page most of the time. Okay, switching gears for a few minutes. What if you have a larger hand that's capable of reaching all of the notes in the measure at once? Kind of like this. I can do this very easily. It's a 10th. I play 10ths all the time in the music that I write and in the classical music that I play. So, if you have a hand that's this big, what do we need to watch out for? All of a sudden, playing this seems so much simpler, but it's not quite, okay? Like the people that need to make the skip, we also need to be acutely aware of not overstretching and not stretching for too long. It can be really tempting if we can play all of these notes. It can be really tempting to keep our hand locked in a position where we just go up and down and make all of it happen. And we have the same issues that we'll run into. One, our hand is going to get stuck here. We're tiring out the muscles, and it's not going to be as musical as we're capable of. So we need to keep things relaxed. And where can we find places to relax? We should always be asking questions like that, whether we have music in octaves or big stretches, or if we just have larger hands that we can make other choices, right? Where can we keep the hands relaxed? That's the most important question. In this piece, we have 2 choices, I think. We can play the downbeat, stretch to the upper notes, and then relax toward the upper notes, like this. I'll do it one more time. Downbeat, stretch toward the upper notes, and then relax. Okay, that is one option. The second option is stretch to the upper notes, and use them as like a springboard and relax back toward the 5th finger, downward, so it's the opposite direction. 5, stretch, push off, relax, back toward 5. You don't have to pick one or the other of these. In fact, it might be great if you incorporate both kinds, right? And your choice might depend on what's happening in the music. So when we have the same chord repeated over and over again, the one that starts on B, maybe we want to relax toward the upper note. That works fine. When we have chords then that go downward toward other harmonies, maybe we want to relax toward 5. yeah? Maybe even while we're playing this 1 in B, sometimes we want to relax downward, sometimes we want to relax toward the top. Whatever. We can even mix it up and throw in some skips. Anything we need to do to keep the hand relaxed. That's the primary goal, right? Okay? Okay, I hope that makes sense. Form. Oh my gosh, when was the last time you talked about the form of a piece of music or thought about it? Or maybe you have never talked about or thought about the form of a piece of music. So form is a way that we can discuss where musical ideas happen. So I'm going to give you a whole little bit of background, and then we're going to talk about why it's super important. So first off, the form of this piece of music is A, B, A prime, B prime, C, A double prime, B double prime, C prime, A triple prime. Now, what does all of that mean? Form in music is a way of easily understanding where musical ideas originate, where they repeat, and if they've been altered in any way. So music always starts with a main melodic and harmonic statement, and we call that A, section A. Then when we get a second statement that's different melody, different harmony, we call that B. Maybe there's a third idea that's different melody, different harmony yet again, we call that C. Now, if any of these ideas come back and are repeated, we use the letter name over again, right? One of the most famous forms in classical music is A, B, A form. The first A section, we get a statement of a melody and the harmony that goes with it. Then we have a B section where the melody and the harmony are completely changed. And then the A section repeats exactly. We get exactly the same notes and harmonies as we had the first time around at the end of the piece. All right? Now, even in pop music, we usually talk about form in terms of verse, chorus, bridge in pop music, but we can give each of those a letter. Verse is A, chorus is B, bridge is C, okay? So in pop music, a typical form might be A, B, C for the bridge, B, B, because a lot of pop music ends with 2 choruses in a row. Now, in the case of this piece by Ludovico Einaudi, we have musical ideas that get repeated, but they are never exactly quoted twice in a row. There's always a change. So because of that, we have things like A and then A prime. Prime is what we call that little apostrophe that's after the letter. And all that means is that between A and A prime, there is a lot of similarity. We probably have the same harmonic structure, or maybe there's only one chord that's different. We probably have a very similar melodic structure. Maybe there's only one note that's different, or a couple notes that are different, but the shape of the melody is overall the same. It sounds familiar to us, right? Well, we can only call it A and A again if it's exactly the same, right? So in the case of this piece of music, we have A, and then later an A prime because it's close, but it's not the same. And then an A double prime because it's close, but not the same as either of the first two. And then an A triple prime at the end because, again, it's close, but not the same as anything that has come before. Now, you might be saying, why is it so important to understand form? It just sounds like a theory thing, right? And we all know what everybody thinks about music theory. But it is not just a theory thing. Even with as simple of a piece of music as Windsong is, understanding where the A section is and how it's altered in A prime and so on, all of those things affect the choices that we make as pianists, as interpreters of the music, as performers of the music. If we know that something in particular happens in section A, and then that thing is gone in section A prime, or it's changed, we either know that we need to bring it out the first time around, or we know that the change that happens in A prime needs to be brought out when it happens the second time around. Or maybe there's a harmony that's a little bit different. We know exactly the note that we want to bring out because we want to always show what's new and what's changing as music goes on and on. There's a reason why the composer didn't write repeat signs. There's a reason why it's not a literal repeat of the same thing over and over again. So when that doesn't happen, when there aren't repeat signs and it's not an exact copy, the composer has a really specific intention, and it's our job as the performer and as the person sharing the music with others, it's our job to figure out why. Why didn't they put a repeat sign? It would have been so much easier, right? So they didn't do it, and they have good reasons. We're going to figure out why they didn't. Okay, let's take a quick look at the 4 different statements of the A section in Windsong. I'm going to play a little bit of them for you. This is the A section. It's the same material, repeated twice. That's it, right? It's all over a B minor harmony that just continues to repeat in this waltz idea. When we get to A prime starts on the pickup to bar 41, okay? A prime, we get the same B minor harmony throughout this entire section. We get the same pickup note, B. We get the same motion to the high note that's a G, right? The first time around we have, it goes right to G and then resolves. The second time around in A prime, bar 41, like the A section, this repeats exactly. Okay? So now we have A, we've compared it to A prime. We see that there is a similarity in the pickup note. There's A, here's A prime. Okay, now, the difference is, in A, in the first A section, we go right to this, call this a suspension, we'll talk about that in part 3. We go right to that dissonant note. In A prime, we highlight the dissonant note. So it still plays a role, but the resolution note is much more emphasized, the F sharp. Okay, now we go to A double prime. A double prime starts on the pickup to measure 85. Starts with the same pickup note, B. We have the same motion in the left hand of all B minor chords, right? Just like the first A section, we go straight to this suspension, the G, and then it resolves. But then, now we get this combination of something that happened like in the first A section with something that happened in the second A section. So in a sense, it's a combination of the two. We get this, we still have this long suspension resolution, and then this group of quick eighth notes that we heard in A prime. Then we have almost an exact repeat. This time, there are a couple notes that are changed in the middle of the right hand, in the middle of A double prime, okay? Now let's take a look at A triple prime, the very last statement of the piece. This starts on the pickup to measure 134, 5, 6, 137, the pickup to 137. Once again, our pickup note is B. We go straight to the suspension, the G. We still have B minor chords. We have the resolution. Like the previous statement of A, we get this repeated, this eighth note section, right? But it's on a different rhythm, okay? It starts on the downbeat this time. In the previous A section, that repeated note thing started on beat 2. Okay? So you're seeing now some examples of things that we need to watch out for as the form develops. In the very first A section, we get this introduction of pickup note, suspension, resolution. Great, that's really important to the melody in this piece of music. A prime, the next one, we get the same pickup. We highlight or go over, go across, still that G, right? Which is a really important note in the melody. But now we're introducing this group of eighth notes. Go further to A double prime, we're combining the two ideas that have already happened. The long suspension of the G with the resolution, and then the eighth notes that we heard, right? Okay, now go to the last time around. Once again, we're combining. First time, those long suspension resolution ideas, and then finally, we have the eighth note grouping rhythmically shifted to start on the downbeat. So knowing all of that about the A section is going to come into play when we start to figure out how we want to phrase things between A and A prime, more especially when we have sections that are maybe even more similar, like A double prime and A triple prime. How are we highlighting the differences of those two sections? How are we highlighting the difference between the very first statement of A that is all long and overarching phrases? Are we going to articulate things differently between the very first statement and when it comes back 2 or 3 times later? Are we going to highlight it differently? Those are all choices now that we need to think about. Let's go through sections B and C super quickly. I think we've done enough form, and especially the deep dive and analysis of the A section. You should have a pretty good idea of how to tackle B and C yourself. But super quickly, our first B section starts on this crazy G minor harmony. The B section, by the way, starts in measure 21, okay? That is a crazy harmony to have in B minor. So crazy that in the other B sections, B prime, we never even get G minor again. Okay? And in B double prime, same thing, we don't get G minor again. Okay? Each time through the B sections, also, the length of each respective harmony changes. We also have different melodic content. So the similarities are that we still have chords like 1, the B minor chord. We still have a major 6, the G major chord. We still have a minor 4, the E minor chord. We still have this D major chord, which I won't go into analysis on, and this A major chord. Okay? So all of the B sections have that in common. Now the length of time that we spend on each harmony differs each time. How about the C section? C starts in measure 69 the first time. For the first time in all of the music, we have an inversion in the left hand. This is actually a G major chord, and every time we've heard G major so far, it's been in root position with G on the bottom. C, we have it in an inversion. So we have a new harmony, and then we have this harmony. Crazy. We go back to our inversion, and we have back to B minor, or 1 chord, okay? Not only is the harmony weird and cool and just wonderful, but we have eighth notes running in the right hand in a similar way that we've had things happen in the A sections. And then kind of a repeat. Yeah? Okay. And then the second time C comes back around, we have similar right hand, but now we're back in root position. Totally different chord now. Once again, different chord. Such good stuff. Oh, musicality, we have finally arrived, right? Maybe this is the part of the video you've been waiting for. Maybe you skipped to this part. Welcome if this is the first thing that you're watching today. There is so much here that we could talk about, but I'm going to tackle what I think are the 3 most important bits to discuss in Wind Song, okay? The melody. The melody has something like a haunting quality to it, and part of that is up to us as the performers to make that happen, to execute that kind of tonality. But the other part has to do with how it's actually written, okay? We touched on just a bit of this during the form part of the video, but the melody, if we start this off, this starts on the pickup to bar 5. Right? It's very simple, right? The main motif in the melody is this skip from 1, first scale degree, to 6, the G. And then we hold on to that. Now if we play G against our B minor chord, there's a lot of dissonance there, right? This does not sound like home. It doesn't sound like anywhere we want to stay for very long. The fact that he makes us stay there for 2 full measures is That's a really long time to sit on this note, which we call a suspension, okay? This is a suspension of the 6th scale degree, and then it resolves to 5 when we get to bar 7. So that compositional technique of using this really long suspension and then resolution is something we need to be aware of as we play this, because we need to articulate the G, this high note in the melody, with enough dynamic that the F sounds like it's less. It sounds like a resolution. We can't play a soft G and then a louder F. That would completely lose the effect that we're going for, right? Okay, so part of this haunting quality is the suspension of 6 to 5. Part of it has to do with us as the performer articulating it, where we bring out the dissonance and then resolve it. Now, if we look at the rest of the first phrase here, and actually in the score, there's one phrase marking that encompasses 8 bars, which means that this by itself, to bar 7, is only half the idea, okay? And then the rest of the half of the idea, the second half of the idea, is that little turn coming back to F. So we could argue that the melody itself, the suspension, is only partially resolved in 7, and then it's fully resolved by the time we get to bar 9. Now, what does that mean for performance? Probably this entire phrase, we sing out to the G on the top, and then every note after is a bit less, all the way to the final F sharp that we have in measure 9. Okay? Same thing happens again. We go to the G, partial resolution, then keep resolving. Yes. Okay. Right? Now, through this whole piece of music, of course, we still have this, it's kind of like a half waltz figure, right? In a typical, let's say, romantic piano piece of music, you'd hear it like this, with all 3 beats articulated and probably an octave in the bass. Right? In this piece in particular, we get 1 and beat 2. So it leaves a little more space for the melody to happen. It's a little easier to play. But it also means we can keep it really out of the way, especially when it's the same chord repeated over and over and over again, okay? So when we start the piece, I actually like to use my right hand to help play this chord. Makes it especially soft. I don't have to bother trying to make that perfect when it's so exposed, okay? Now when the right hand comes in, here we go. Again. Ooh, now we've come to our first statement of the B section, as you know from the form part of the video. The first thing that we get hit with in the B section is what I like to call a color chord, or it's a harmony that's totally unexpected. It has nothing actually to even do with the key of B minor, right? Okay, so in a key, in any key that we play music in, we have a group of chords that fit the key. And in every key, there are 7 of those. Those 7 are called diatonic chords. They all work in the key. They don't need any changes of accidentals, right? One primary way to see if you have a non-diatonic chord or a color chord or a chord that's going to be really interesting, it's going to have a very interesting sound, is to look for an accidental in the sheet music. In this case, if we're looking at bar 21, we have this B flat. Now obviously we're in the key of B minor, not B flat minor, so B flat is definitely not in the key that we're in. That single note is responsible for such a dramatic change in color. Because of that, we really want to highlight that note in particular. Let me show you what I mean. So if we're coming into the B section, bar 21, here's the pickup. If I make sure that the B flat is just a little bit more than the rest of the chord that the left hand is playing, then we really get a nice sense of the color of this chord. If I don't do that, let me show you what happens. We're coming from before the section starts, and then here's the pickup. We don't hear, if the B flat isn't brought out, we don't hear just how dramatic that sound actually is, okay? So we need to know that's a color chord, it's a non-diatonic chord, it doesn't fit in the key. Which note is responsible for that? In this case, it's B flat, and then bring that out of the texture a little bit. Right? And then we resolve. Okay, now we're going to keep going. Now here we're getting to measure 30. All of a sudden in measure 30, we have a regular G major chord. The only difference between the G major in 30 and the G minor in 21 is that B flat. So there's another reason. We haven't heard it yet when we're playing measure 21, but another reason to emphasize the B flat in 21 is because we have a B natural coming later in 29. We want to hear the juxtaposition of those two harmonies, right? Okay, now as we continue to look at the B section, this first statement of the B section here, we have a similar melodic idea that we first heard in the A section, this turn that leads us to the downbeat. We have that in the B section leading us in first, and we sit there for 4 bars, and again in this dissonance. And then we have resolution, but this time not done with the right hand, but done with the left hand. And then finally down to the root. Now the harmonic rhythm speeds up. What's harmonic rhythm? Harmonic rhythm is the speed at which our harmonies are changing over the course of the piece. So we have gone from the beginning of the A section, we had one harmony. That one harmony lasted us 20 measures. 20 measures of B minor. Then we get to the B section, measure 21. We have 4 bars. That's already a lot faster, a lot fewer bars of this G minor chord. And then we get 4 bars back in B minor. But then hold on, we don't stay there. We don't stay in B minor. We get another change. We go to G major, this time for only 2 bars. And then we go to E minor, this time for only 2 bars. And then we go to D major, this time for only 2 bars. And then we go to A major, this time for only 2 bars. So that also plays a dramatic role in the interpretation of this piece of music and its effect on the listener, right? So we want to also highlight those things as we play. How can we keep in the A section, not only the very first one, but the subsequent sections, how can we keep this very still, almost like glass or a calm lake, right? It's a very, very calm and serene in a sense, almost like I almost picture there being mist or fog in the air, and then we hear the melody come out of that. Nice. And then a repeat of the melody. I haven't lifted the pedal yet. All of this can just blur together. That's what he wanted. And then we get to B. Bringing out that B flat. Back to the B minor harmony, but not for too long. Keep it moving forward. Finally, we get a little bit of rest Okay, so sometimes we might be tempted when there's changes of harmony to emphasize them. We might be tempted to pull the tempo back or to create a little rubato or a little retard. And he wants us to do the opposite. And he's telling us that through the speeding up of harmonies as we get to the end of the B statement, okay? Plus, we also have these groups of eighth notes that lead us across the downbeat, continually across the downbeat. So they're preventing us from taking time and slowing down. We want to get to the downbeat, not hold back from it. Again, to the downbeat, and then to the downbeat. And again, here's a turn to the downbeat, and a turn to the downbeat, and again, a turn to the downbeat. And then we can make a little retard and round the whole phrase off, right? Okay, now we're on to page 2. We're approaching A prime. This is our first time repeating the A section, and we get another aspect of the melody that's really important from this point through the whole rest of the piece of music. We start with the same pickup of B, but immediately we get a group of 4 eighth notes. Right? And they repeat, that group of 4 eighth notes repeats 4 times. There is so much we can do with these measures of music from this point and through all of the bars that are related to this throughout the entire rest of the piece of music. And this, I think stuff like this is so exciting. Okay, so the worst thing we can do when we have repeats of the same notes is play them the same way over and over again. So we don't want to play. That means nothing, right? It doesn't move us. We don't feel anything. Now instead, let's take a thought back to the title of this piece. It's called Wind Song, right? So does that have something to do with nature, maybe? Does it have something to do with sound carried on air? Does it have to do maybe something with the sound that wind itself makes? We can answer all of those questions in this phrase, actually. And we even have lots of ways we can answer it. So, for example, let's say that we are out and in a place in nature where it's common to hear an echo would be something like in a canyon, right? Or some kind of valley with a lot of rocks around us. This could be an echo. It could be a first statement that's from us, maybe. And then every repeat is an echo that we're hearing around us. So, in that case, every group of 4 after the first one is going to be softer. Because of that, we need to play the first one out enough. I know the piece says pianissimo. We need to play the first one out enough that we have a place to come down, and then down further, and then down further again. Each time, right? That's one way to interpret this. Each one is an echo. But we could also have a double echo. So it could be something like this, where the first statement is our main statement, and then an echo. And then we have another one that's a little bit stronger, like us rethinking something or repeating something out, and then another echo, right? Now in this case, our dynamic levels are going to be a little bit different. We have our biggest one, the first still. The second one is lower, it's an echo. The third one is, again, we feel like it's us restating, so it's a little bit higher. And then the fourth one is the quietest one. So here it is again. Right? Okay. Now that is a human in nature. That's one perspective on that. But we could think about this entire phrase being the wind itself. And that lends another couple approaches to playing this. We could say wind increases in intensity as it's blowing, in which case this can keep getting stronger and stronger as we go through the phrase, right? We make one crescendo through all 4 statements. Or wind kind of comes and goes, right? It never blows consistently. So maybe the wind starts softly and picks up, and then it dies away again. Yeah, I'll do that one more time. Right? Now, where it picks up in intensity, where it dies away, we have almost an infinite number of choices, right? That can happen on any note in the phrase. It could start off a little bit louder and die away, and then come back a little bit. There are so many ways to shape and phrase these 4 bars. It's kind of incredible. And then the cool thing is that Einaudi gives us bars like this over and over and over again in the piece to continue to explore. And guess what? On none of them did he write any articulation, any dynamic changes. There aren't any markings. There's a phrase marking to show us one big general idea, but there aren't any other markings. And I think that is a big clue from him to us that each time we play this, we have freedom to express it in so many different ways. It's something that makes this piece actually is both so simple, so beautiful, and so profound. It is one concept that can be explored in such a variety of different musical ways, articulated in so many ways, gestured in so many ways, right? The story can be told in so many ways. So if we jump, for example, to C, this starts in measure 69, okay? In C, we have this first time that we're hearing a harmony that doesn't start on the root. Normally, right, we'd get to this section, and if it were just normally composed, this would be here. It's not there, it's up here. So it's less stable, it's more atmospheric. And then, like we had in the very first B statement, we have one note that makes an entire shift in color. In this case, it's our G sharp. It makes a huge difference in the tonality and the color of the chord. It's just one note different. And then it resolves back to yeah? That's so cool. Now, the second time we get C, we actually do go to the root first. We go to G major, same right hand. And then we follow with harmony that we know from the B section. And that's cool in itself, but on top of that, in both of these C sections, we have this group of 4 eighth notes followed by a long note. Is that an echo? Is it a double echo? Is it a single echo? Is it the wind blowing? Which one of those? We have so many choices and we have so many opportunities to explore that. The last thing that I want to point out musically here, we get to the final A section. This starts in measure 137, okay? It's a lot like the very first start of the piece. But then these eighth notes, for the first time all piece long, this group of eighth notes starts on the downbeat. It starts strongly, right? Every other time we've explored it, it has either been a part of the pickup or it's been shifted off the downbeat. But this time, right, it's shifted. So all of these things, oh gosh, there's so many to explore, and I hope that some of them gave you some ideas of all of the potential that this piece has, the beauty that's in there to explore, that's just waiting for you to explore and to figure out. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this very in-depth lesson on Ludovico Einaudi's Wind Song. I hope it's given you lots to think about, from the technique in the left hand that we talked about to start today off, to the form and analysis and how much that means and how important that is to music performance. It's not just theory, but it has so much to do with the interpretive choices that we make as pianists, to this exploration of musical ideas and ways to execute the beautiful music that's in this particular piece. Be sure and like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, leave a comment below. I'll try to be active and answer some questions if you have any, and ding that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos on Behind the Notes here, this Musicnotes channel. All right, today's video is going to end with two performances of myself playing this piece of music. One is going to be just on my regular grand piano, that no alterations to it, just the way we have worked on it during today's lesson. And then I'm going to do something called felting the piano. I'm going to do that off camera. We'll come back and I'll record it again for you, and it'll sound completely different. Now, why am I doing that? Because if you've heard Ludovico Einaudi's original recording of this piece, you'll know that the piano sounds super warm and soft and almost has this like pillowy texture to it. It's really lovely. Part of that is his playing and his own technique, and the other part of it is that he has felted his grand piano that he used to record. And what that means is he's put a piece of felt between the hammers and the strings. Okay, now if you want to achieve something similar, if you have an upright piano, you are in luck, okay? Because you can press the middle pedal probably, and a piece of felt will drop down between the hammers and the strings. It's called the mute pedal or the practice pedal, but it does almost the same thing. You'll get a very similar tone, this very soft, pillowy tone, right? If you have a digital keyboard, look for a preset that's called something like mellow piano or soft piano, something like that. And a lot of the attack will be taken away and you'll get a very nice, soft tone to play this piece of music with. Now, if you have a grand piano like me, it's a little bit more work, but I will go into and put a piece of felt between the hammers and strings this way on the piano, and then I'll come back and video that for you so you can enjoy it. All right, that's all for today. Hope to see you around the channel some more, and enjoy these two performances.